Classy Kass from Y105, and this is Y105's Reading Radio. We're going to do reading time today, and I brought my favorite book from my childhood that my mom used to read, Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter, and it's illustrated by Jack and Louise Myers. Are you ready for this? It's a very well-loved book. You can see it's kind of fallen apart. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a grassy bank beneath the roots of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dear," said Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Run along now and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." Mrs. Rabbit took her basket and went through the woods to the baker's to buy a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were good little rabbits. They went down the lane to gather blackberries for supper. But Peter, who was very naughty, hopped straight to Mr. McGregor's fine garden and squeezed under the locked gate. Uh-oh, Peter's being naughty again. He ate some lettuce and beans and radishes. Then, feeling rather sick, he looked for some parsley. But whom should he meet but old Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor jumped up and ran after Peter, calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was frightened. He ran all over the garden looking for the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. Then Peter caught the buttons of his jacket in a gooseberry net. It was a blue jacket with big brass buttons and quite new. Poor Peter. When some friendly sparrows heard Peter crying, they begged him to try to get away before Mr. McGregor caught him. Mr. McGregor was about to pop a sieve, that's a shovel, over Peter's head when Peter wriggled out of his jacket and dashed away. He lost his coat. He rushed into the tool shed and hid in a can. It would have been a good place to hide if there had not been so much water in it. Presently, Peter sneezed, and Mr. McGregor was after him again in no time. Up and down and all around the garden they ran. At last Mr. McGregor gave up and went back to his work. Peter saw a door in the wall, but he was too fat to squeeze under it. He asked a mouse the way to the gate, but she had a large pea in her mouth and didn't answer. Soon Peter came to a pond where a pretty cat sat staring at some goldfish. He went on without speaking to her, for he had heard about cats from his wise little cousin, Benjamin Bunny. Suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the scritch-scratch of Mr. McGregor's hoe. Peter hid under a bush, but as nothing happened, he came out and climbed into a big wheelbarrow. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. Beyond him was the gate. Ooh. Peter got down very quietly and ran to the gate and squeezed under it. Then he ran as fast as he could into the woods. Mr. McGregor hung up Peter's jacket and shoes and a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. That's all Peter's clothes. Peter never stopped running until he reached his home in the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down on the soft grass and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes, for it was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that he had lost in a week. Uh-oh. Peter did not feel well that evening. His mother put him to bed. She made some chamomile tea and gave a spoonful of it to Peter. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and fresh blackberries for supper. Guess that's what you get when you're naughty. That was Peter Rabbit, and this is Y105's Reading Radio. Don't forget to read a good book today.